It's the Chiefs and Texans on Sunday from Arrowhead, and to help us break it down, we bring in somebody who's pretty familiar with both teams in Nick Wright, Kansas City native, former 610 host in both Kansas City and Houston. Now he's the host of First Things First on FS1 and What's Right on Sirius Radio. Nick, appreciate your time, and I got to imagine that this game on Sunday is going to be pretty special to you, considering your history with both teams.
Well, listen, it's special to me because it's a Chiefs playoff game for what I think is the most complete and the best Chiefs team of my lifetime. I used to live in Houston. To be totally candid, I don't really care what happens with the Texans. I like Deshaun. I like him a lot. Nuke Hopkins is awesome, and J.J. Watt is an all-time great. But there's one team in the league I root for, and it happens to be the team that I believe this year is going to win the Super Bowl. And so I'm super excited for this weekend's game. I was in Kansas City last weekend because I anticipated there was going to be a wild card weekend game. I didn't expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to pull off that miracle in week 17. So while I was disappointed I couldn't go to a game, it was for a great reason. The Chiefs now well rested and ready to go against the Texans this Sunday.
Nick, I think anyone who follows you on social has heard anything you've said, isn't surprised at your comments about your optimism regarding the Chiefs this season. But before we get into the Chiefs, I want to ask you about the wild card games last weekend, particularly the Texans-Bills game. Texans come out on top, 22-19. That game goes into overtime, which I'm sure all Chiefs fans and anybody who's going to face them was excited knowing that they were going to have to play an extra quarter, and those defensive guys ended up playing 85 snaps. But besides Deshaun Watson just stepping up late in that game and making the kind of plays that we've seen dating back to his time at Clemson, what were your takeaways from that game as it relates to what the Chiefs are going to have to face on Sunday when they face the Texans?
Well, the Chiefs have an opportunity to jump out all over this team. The Texans, once again, as they have all year long, started slow. I think they were the only team in the NFL this year to not score an opening drive touchdown all season long, certainly through the first 16 weeks. I'm not sure what happened week 17 when they weren't playing their guys. And credit to them for showing some perseverance and for overcoming that 16-0 deficit. But most of what I saw in that game made me even more optimistic about this weekend's game. There is one note, though. I thought J.J. Watt was mostly just going to be inspiration and not that effective coming back from that torn pec. Took J.J. about a quarter and a half to 2 quarters to get going, and then he looked like J.J. bleeping Watt. He was really, really special, and his sack, I think, keyed the comeback. So I do think you have to watch that. The Texans have a more than competent rushing attack and obviously a quarterback that you have to bring all the way to the ground. You can't just think you've got him in the grasp. So those things showed up, but their slow starts and what I think is a very susceptible pass defense made me excited about the game. Josh Allen and the Bills just weren't able to take advantage of it.
Nick, I think you bring up a great point, because I thought the same thing when I looked at the snap count, seeing that J.J. Watt played 52 snaps in that game, knowing that all of the defensive guys, Zach Cunningham, Whitney Merciless, Bernardrick McKinney, those guys played all 85 snaps. Those guys played 100% of the snaps, wondering how J.J. was going to feel the day after, knowing that he was playing for the first time in a while. But I want to ask you, because anytime two teams play in the playoffs that face in the regular season, they're going to try to draw parallels based on what happened in the first game as opposed to what it means in the second matchup. And it's hard for the Chiefs because they were missing so many guys. And you talk about J.J. Watt. It was just at the presser. The Eric Fisher, J.J. Watt thing already came back up to be a storyline that's gone on for the last few years. But for you, when you're analyzing this game and you're coming up with your conclusions as far as your matchups, what you want to see, how much do you draw from that Week 6 game where the Texans came out on top by 7 points as to what could take place on Sunday?
Well, I think you can draw some concerning conclusions for the very end of the game. When the Chiefs got the ball back with a chance to go tie, couldn't do it. I think they went 3 and out, and then they could not get Deshaun Watson and that Texans offense off the field. Now, the Chiefs defense obviously has been a very different defense the final third of the season, but that still is a concern for me. My worst case scenario as a Chiefs fan is you're down 4, there's 5 minutes left, you don't have the ball, and will you get the ball back? They were not able to against the Texans. But the other things that happened in that game, to me, were there were a few anomalies that you do not have to concern yourself with. The Chiefs were en route to creating a 3-score lead. Patrick Mahomes sees that they have flagged defensive holding, so he tries to take advantage of the free play. And then the referees get together and say, actually, there wasn't defensive holding, which in general, I like when they, first of all, don't think they got it right correcting it. But if you do throw a flag and it's the wrong flag, I like that you can correct it. But the problem is exactly in that spot where you have a quarterback that's savvy enough to say, oh, I have a free play, and throw a pass I don't think he otherwise would, because another touchdown he had in that game was a very dangerous pass to Tyreek Hill down the middle, but he did it knowing he had the free play because a guy had jumped off sides. And then obviously the game flipped right before the half. After the Chiefs get a turnover or get a stop, the Patrick Mahomes has a bad fumble that he just can't have. So I don't think the Chiefs can lose this game if they play a clean game. I don't think they have to win the turnover battle. I think they could even lose the turnover battle by 1 and potentially be okay. But the critical turnovers in your red zone and in your opponent's red zone obviously can't happen.
Yeah, and the other storyline with Mahomes, just late in the first half, he re-aggravated that ankle, and that ended up being a thing in the second half, that he couldn't move around the pocket. He couldn't do all the things that we're used to seeing from him. And I'm curious, because I know you've spoken about this for a while now, with what the AFC playoffs have looked like for the last couple of decades. It was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. And now that Brady announced that he's coming back, but he's out of the playoffs. But for this group, for 3 of these 4 quarterbacks in the AFC playoffs right now, for Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, just from a big picture point of view of what we could see, granted they stay healthy for the next couple of decades, are we seeing that next era of quarterbacks that we've been waiting for the last couple of decades, that we've seen since Manning, Brady, and all the battles that they've had?
And I would add a third to Manning and Brady, Big Ben. So if you from 01 to now, there's been 18 Super Bowls. 16 of them from the AFC have been Brady, Manning, and Big Ben. The other 2, one for Rich Gannon and one for Joe Flacco. I think 18 years is too optimistic of a time frame, but I think over the next decade, you could see a scenario where Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, and Lamar Jackson make 8 Super Bowls between the 3 of them over the next 10 years, with a couple others being peeled off. Maybe Baker gets it together. Maybe Joe Burrow or Tua's the real. Who knows who else could get involved in that conversation. Feels like the Steelers under Tomlin will always be relevant. But yes, I do think, I think that Mahomes is, I know Mahomes is as good as as talented as any quarterback who's ever played. Yeah. Deshaun does have that, and I know it's a cliche, he does have that clutch gene. He is a special player. I joke about it now, and obviously it worked out great, but I still have tweets up from the day of the draft that when the Chiefs traded up and they didn't pick Deshaun, I was furious. I was like, this kid from Texas Tech, I just watched Deshaun Watson beat Alabama. I thought he should have been the #1 pick of the draft. Now, obviously, Patty has been better than anyone ever could have imagined. And he's the best player in football. But Deshaun is, I believe, a future Hall of Fame talent. And Lamar is going to be unanimous MVP. And so I know that's kind of discounting the Titans. And the Titans, by the way, they might beat the Ravens. Yeah. And as much as I would love to have that game at home, the Titans are scary. Derrick Henry is the real deal. And Tannehill's, even though he didn't against the Patriots, playing best football of his life. Yeah. And so but yes, it's a very long answer to a very short question. Yes, I think these 3 guys are going to run the conference for at least the next decade.
Now, I want to ask you what this game means to the Texans, because in their franchise history, they've never been to a conference title game. And outside of that 2017 thriller between Connor Cook and Brock Osweiler down there in the wild card round, and then excluding last week's game, they were 0-3 in the playoffs under Bill O'Brien, and they had lost all those games by at least 2 touchdowns. So for them, what does this game mean not only to Bill O'Brien and the Texans franchise, but just overall for the AFC and for a new team trying to get into that mix?
Yeah, well, listen, Bill O'Brien has somehow just become ensconced in power down there. He's as powerful as anyone in the NFL outside of Bill Belichick, honestly. He's the de facto GM. They traded away multiple firsts, a second, multiple thirds for players on this year's roster. No. So it was really important that they not get beat by the Buffalo Bills at home, and that game didn't go the way it was looking was going to go, especially after last year. They're down 21-0 at home to the Colts in that playoff game. A few years ago, the Chiefs whooped them 30-0. Like, they have had some bad playoff moments. I think Texans fans, from talking to my friends and colleagues down there, are still somewhat skeptical of him. Like, the record is a winning record, and they win the division a lot, but they rarely feel like within the game they have the coaching edge. If they were to win this game, then I think he silences all the doubters. But if they lose this game, and if they lose this game decisively, the way I feel like they might, then I think people start saying, I mean, you damn near lost to the Bills. Last year you got embarrassed, but he's in no jeopardy whatsoever of losing his job, anything like that. Yeah. It's just you'd start to worry, or you would have wasted the Deshaun Watson rookie contract portion of his tenure, which is, or being close to it, which is so valuable.
Yeah. Now, flip side, on the Chiefs end, they've never been to back-to-back conference title games in their franchise history. So, and you mentioned it earlier, this is the most balanced team in your lifetime that they've had. They have a top 5 scoring offense. They have a top 10 scoring defense. Going back to 1997 is the last time they've had that. And since then, before that, it was 1969 when they won the Super Bowl before they had those two things. So what does this game mean to the Chiefs to try and get back to where they were last year so they can take the step forward?
Listen, if the Chiefs lose, if Baltimore just keeps rolling and the Chiefs go to Baltimore and lose, I'm going to be really bummed. I'm going to look at last year and the D Ford offsides that no one will ever forget about until this team wins the Super Bowl, because I think we would have whooped the Rams. And I'm going to say missed opportunity, guys. But if they lose to Baltimore, good for them. Like that, they're an excellent team. They won 12 in a row. I'll be able to deal with it. If they lose this game, I'm going to be crushed. Mm-hmm. They're at home. They're healthiest they've been. They have everything going for them. I think the bracket fell perfectly. Of the 4 teams that made Wild Card Weekend, the Texans would have been my #1 pick that I wanted to face. So I think it's less about what they have to gain from winning this week. They're supposed to win this week. Mm-hmm. And more about, I feel similar with the Chiefs as I do this week about the Packers. Obviously, the Chiefs have more time with their superstar quarterback, but the Packers don't have to win the Super Bowl this year. But if they don't take advantage of the bye and the bracket falling the way it did, you're going to wonder if it'll ever happen for them. I will wonder if it'll ever happen for the Chiefs, but we also then will be up against Patty's rookie contract and having to make some tough decisions. So we'll deal with the conference championship game when you get there, but they should win this week, and I'll be crushed if they don't. You mentioned they haven't been to back-to-back conference championship games. I couldn't believe this. They are the first team, they are the only team in the league to be at this round in consecutive years. Yeah. There is not a single team from the Final 8 last year that's in the Final 8 this year other than Kansas City. I couldn't believe it when I read it, but then I checked. It is accurate. Yeah. So they've been as successful as anybody. They just need to break through.
All right, Nick, before we let you go, appreciate your time, but do you have a prediction? Do you have a score prediction?
Yep.
Seems like you think the Chiefs are going to win. What is your score prediction for Sunday?
37-24. I think Kansas City jumps out on them. If I had to give, I think Kansas City jumps out on them early, 21-3-ish. I'll say, 21-3, something like that. All of a sudden in the second half, it's 21-13, and we're all a little nervous, and then Patty puts them away.
And then you got a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, and all those guys they brought in that are not, they've got that mindset, they've got that leadership. Nick, we're around him every day. It is a special deal, and as somebody who's a Chiefs fan, I can attest to you, to a man, that this is a different vibe in that room, particularly on the defensive side. It's been a whole lot of fun. Sunday should be fun. And
I know you got to run just quickly. When Patty had his kneecap dislocated, I like everyone, was catatonic. I didn't know. No one thought he was only going to be out 2 weeks and then be back to himself a few weeks later. But because I now know that's what happened, I do wonder if that moment and the weeks that followed were good for this team, where they almost beat the Packers without Patty. They did beat the Vikings. 2 of the Final 8 teams left. They played with their backup quarterback. They were crushing the Titans, and then I still don't know what happened in the final 3 minutes of that game. And the defense has been sensational since then. And on the Titans game, by the way, even if we beat the Titans, we don't get the bye. We don't get the 1 seed. But if we beat the Titans, we don't get Terrell Suggs. Right. So maybe that's what happened at the end of the game, was we were just supposed to get Suggs. But no, the team feels like defensively it turned a corner when Patty went down, and he's obviously the same old guy. So I'm super excited. Yeah, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. We'll catch it on Sunday. Nick, we appreciate your time again. Find him on First Things First on FS1 weekday mornings. Nick, we appreciate your time, man. Thank you. Great job, man.